Morning, church. You're all bright and awake and all looking super hungry for something to eat. I hope it's the word of the Lord that you're looking for. I remembered my wife. She's very excited every time the grandchildren come to our place, and so here's our oldest grandson. She felt that he's a bit too skinny for his age. He's 2 years old, too skinny, she thought, and so every time he looks at this boy, he says, I've got to feed you with more food. So he puts him on a high chair, and Theo loves to play more than eat. So he would not want to finish the food and want to run away. And Grandma would say, no, you're not getting anywhere. And so she would feed him until the plate's completely cleaned up. Well, one day he really surprised both of us. So he wants to get out and play, and Grandma says, no, you're going to finish your food. And he just puts his hand on his hips and say, Grandma, I'm finished. We were all shocked. Where did he learn that from? All those words, you know. So I hope today I'm going to talk. I'm going to share a word, and I hope that you will finish the food that's on the plate. All right, and don't put your arms around this and say, I'm finished, right, before I'm finished. So today I'm going to talk about the wilderness, that God is out there and that we need to take time to go outside every now and again. There's something inside us that's a little bit wild that pokes its head out every now and again, and you know, and sort of wants to get out, and we just sort of say we cannot let the wild side out too much because we've got work to do, or we've got people around us, we've got to behave, right? But until such time when you go out there and let the wild side resonate with the wilderness out there, there's something out there where God is able to say something into our hearts. And so I'd like to encourage you guys to find an opportunity to go out into the wilderness. So why the wilderness? Why out there? Because if you really read the Bible, it says the first God's communication to us is creation. And the creation is wild. And so God is out there together with His creation. And when we look at the wilderness, if we define wilderness, it's actually very simply this: an open space in all directions. Where do you get wilderness? You go out where there's a space. But for a lot of us, we're too busy. And also we find that the places to go in the wild is getting less and less these days. To us, it's simply just getting away from things that are occupied, that are the noise and the busyness of our lives. So we just got to go somewhere. A wild place is a place that's full of possibilities. It's a place of opportunity. It's a place where things happen, where God's creation are activated and alive. And everything moves. Nothing is static. Whereas inside or in a classroom, we learn through theory, and theory is about thinking more so than experience, whereas outside it's all about experience and learning through your experience and seeing what's going out there. So a wild place is a place that's full of possibility and promise. But also the wild place is a place of danger and a place of desolation. And the Bible talks about the demons out there as well. So there's danger, there is things that could go wrong. It's not cultivated, it's not civilized. So why do we want to go out to a place that's both full of possibilities and full of danger? I think if we can reflect a little bit, let's go back to the Israelites. The Israelites wandered around, as the Bible says, for 40 years in the wilderness. So why do God allow His favorite people to go out in the wilderness for such a long time? 40 years is a long time. The clue is in this. Deuteronomy chapter 8 verse 3 says that God wants to teach us that man does not live on bread alone, but every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. The bread is man-made, but the word of the Lord is alive. It brings life to us. So, let me tell you a story of a man that went up to the mountains with me, and we have this 4-day event. he, he came with great expectations that God will start to touch him and make things happen for him. So he went with us, and for 2 days, he's got really angry because the things he's expected that God would touch him in the wilderness did not happen. So he says, Michael, I'm so angry and upset with you. You know what? I've got a problem with gambling addiction. But in your program, you talked about pride, you talked about money, you talked about family and being a good husband and all that. But you haven't got anyone who speak about gambling addiction. I have wasted my time. I don't know what I'm doing here. I'm gonna just leave. I said, just hang on there. I really don't have any answers for you, mate. So you just hang around. Now, in that program that we have in the mountains, up in the mountains, is a place where we get the men to pick up a piece of rock or a wood that represents their burden. And they walk up a hill and lay it at the foot of the cross. So when this gentleman, after having been upset with me and I don't know what to do with him, I just let him continue. And he picked up his rock, laid his burden at the foot of the cross, and he started to cry and break down into tears, and something inside him has surfaced. And when he came down from that hill, he said to me, Michael, I don't know what happened, but God has touched me. I'm now so convicted. I felt my pain being taken away. I'm now ready to take the next step to deal with my gambling addiction. I don't know what happened in the wilderness. The only thing I do know is that the program is man-made. The program that I have brings a lot of men up the hills, but it wasn't programmed to solve every need and problem. But one thing I do know, in the wilderness, somehow something happened where God can touch the heart of man, where man-made programs cannot resolve, but he brings it out. So in there, underneath that guy, all I can say is his addiction is due to the fact that he wants to bury his pain through the addiction. But I think God has a way to deal with his addiction, is that he's got to say, you don't have to rely on that. Come to me, and I will heal you. And he has just begun a journey where he's finding now programs, proper programs that will deal with his gambling addiction. The Bible doesn't speak about protect me from danger or living happily ever after when you become a Christian. In fact, the Bible speaks about crisis. Crisis is the coexistence of danger and promise. In the wilderness, there is crisis. The two held in tension. This is the place where God dwells, and it is where he is, and this is where he touches hearts and open you up and bring up pain and things that are buried in you. It comes out in the wilderness. We all know about God's creation of beautiful flowers, the hills, the beautiful waters, and the rivers. We sing and celebrate all things bright and beautiful. So that's God's beautiful creation, but we also need to look at the less beautiful. That's where we can find God. Where sometimes if you stand in front of a raging ocean or a big storm, you could feel that that's a creation. These are the moments that will remind us of the ways of God, that God is larger and bigger, and it's sometimes incomprehensible, and it can't be understood. But it actually, when you stand out there in the creation with all this big stuff that are not so beautiful sometimes, that you know that God is big and we are fragile. So what do we do most of the time? We try to control our surroundings. We prolong our comfort. We put air conditioning and heaters. We try to preserve our food and keep them in advance and refrigerate and things like that. But this process, perhaps it is where we too die a death, a slow rot, a withering of our souls, and a decaying of our inner being, as we shrink away from the risk of discomfort of the wilderness places. That's where we can lose the urgency of human existence. So on the necessary tension of danger and promise in the wilderness, we can forget the limitations of our lives and our desperate need for his daily sustenance. Every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord, we're protected from the examples of the power of God, and we shelter from the unexpected teachings of discomfort. So don't hide away from Him. Don't stay inside. Don't keep yourself too comfortable. Go out. Otherwise, we lose touch of this beautiful, ancient communication with God. Let me leave you another thought about the wilderness. In the wilderness, when you go out into the forest or the bush, something else happens. Speed has not much meaning anymore. Everything is slowed down. And it's slowed down to a very familiar pace. It's actually, on average, about 3 miles an hour, which is a walking pace. In a book called 3 Mile an Hour God, Japanese theologian Kosuke Koyama highlights this, that God tends to grow slowly in order to educate us. 40 years in the wilderness, that's a long time. And why does God take such a long time? Because God, in what Koyama says, God walks slowly because He is love. If He is not love, He would have gone faster. But love has its own speed. It is an inner speed. It is a spiritual speed. It is not the kind of technological speed we have on our Facebook and our mobile phones. It is slow, yet it is Lord of all speeds out there, because it is the speed of love. It is the speed we walk, and therefore it's the speed of love God walks too. 1 Corinthians 13 talks about love is patient, love is kind. Patient means walking pace. 3 mile an hour God. If you want to hear God, I suggest you go to a wide space, open space out there and start walking. I got out of the corporate world and started my own business in coaching 3 years ago. I've had nothing to show. But I believe God called me, and I went to South Africa at that time to suss out what this fourth musketeer is all about. It has a very weird name, the fourth musketeer. Never heard of it before. So I went there. As you can see, I'm a perfect alpha male specimen here. Quite the contrary. I have to round out a bunch of Aussie blokes, and they all say, "You want to do what? Go out the mountains? You're not really the right model to go." I'm a townie, a corporate man, and I come from a family of nerds. Camping and the wilderness is not my thing at all. So the thought of extreme crime rates at Johannesburg, let alone the 4-day hike up Drakensberg, the big mountains of South Africa, scared the hell out of me, right? So, and not only that, I have to purchase equipment, I have no money. Everything seemed completely wrong. But inside me, I hear a voice saying, "Don't settle for safe. Take your place, Michael. Find me in the wilderness." So God took me from my comfortable world of corporate life, and with a group of 8 men, we went to Drakensberg, and we discovered that there's something amazing out there. In South Africa, I discovered the God I never knew. He is fierce, He is wild and passionate. Why do I say He is wild? Because I think God takes immense risks. He gave angels and men free will, including the freedom to reject Him, not just once, but every single day. When He spoke to my heart, I thought, wow, that is the kind of God I want to follow. I finished the climb, worn out, changed inside and outside, because I was bruised and all of that, not very strong. But I was reignited in my faith, and I was responding to a call that I least expected. God says to me, "Go get the men into the wilderness. I am waiting. And hence, we came back and started the Fourth Musketeer. The Fourth Musketeer, if I can just move a little bit more into it, it's an organization of men who basically have 4 core values: faith, adventure, justice, and brotherhood. So what we do is we grab a group of men and we want to encourage them to become better husbands, better fathers, and better church volunteers as well, because most men shrug away from that somehow, which leads us to the history of how 4M began. Actually, the Fourth Musketeer of 4M is the idea of a woman, despite the fact that it's all about men. Ruth, this Dutch lady in Holland, she is the wife of the pastor of a big church. She says to her husband, Hank, she says, look, our church, all the women are volunteering, doing all the hard work. They cook, they make muffins, they bake, and they took care of a lot of things, and they always volunteer for this and that. And even in leadership roles, the women, there are more women there rather than men. I don't know what to do with our men. They say they're always busy with making money and they're not there. And Hank says, look, I've been praying about this, but I've been reading a book that inspired me immensely. It's a book written by Alexander Dumas. It's called The Three Musketeers. But I'm so intrigued that the book seemed to focus on D'Artagnan, the fourth young guy who is all over the place when he started off. He is so full of himself, and he gets into fights with people in the pubs, and he is disrespectful and arrogant and all of that. But throughout his journey of up and down, he was mentored by 3 older musketeers, and eventually he qualified himself and became a full-fledged musketeer. And says, Ruth, you know what is a musketeer? Well, what is it? So a musketeer is a man who wants to serve the king, a man who wants to fight for the king, a man who will die for his king. That's the kind of man we want in our church. And our king is Jesus. So he rounded up a group of 60 over men. And because Holland has got no hills, they've got to go to another country. So they went to Belgium. Country's flat. They went to Belgium. And they climbed the mountains for 4 days, 3 nights. And thus began the Fourth Musketeer of 4M. And in there, the mountain experience is called the Extreme Character Challenge, or in short, the XCC. So with that, the man starts to have this mountain XCC activities. But then the wife says, look, I want to be a part of it as well. It's all for men. You know, the woman says, I want to be a part of it. So the Fourth Musketeer says, look, we apart from inspiring men up in the mountains and bringing them down and become responsible father and sons and husbands, we can include the women. So the other aspect of the Fourth Musketeer is to fight justice globally. So how do we fight justice? We can't whip up our swords and start killing people along the way. That's not how we fight. But the way to fight justice is to actually champion the needs of the oppressed and those without a voice. Give them a voice. And so the Fourth Musketeer started this program called the Muskathlon. It comes from musketeer and marathon. And if you smash that, it becomes a muskathlon. So we collaborated with 2 big organizations, the Open Doors for the Persecuted Church and Compassion to liberate children from poverty. So what we do is we organize events where people run a marathon run, they go cycling, and they go trekking at the places of affliction. So for example, in Compassion, they have places like Uganda, Rwanda, Indonesia, and Philippines, where there are poor children there in those countries, so they get the athletes to go in there to participate in them. Similarly, in Open Doors, we organize runs in places like Jordan, Lebanon, Egypt, where a lot of Syrian refugees are taking refuge in those countries. So this year we had several countries where we organized muscathlons. We've been doing this since the Fourth Musketeer began some 10 years ago. And I personally have participated in 3 of these events in the last 3 years. I ran in Uganda, I ran in the Philippines, and I ran in Indonesia. So now the ladies can come in, our wives, our daughters, our moms, they come in and be a part of this musketeer thing. If I can go back a little bit back to the XCC, we often have to start with the man first, for the fact that we believe that the man is the leader of the household. And if anything happens to the man, the family gets affected. If the man don't go to church, the family have a hard time coming to the church. If the man don't step up to fight injustice for the world, the family will struggle to move in that direction. So that's why we always start the man and say, let's take the man out into the wilderness. Let's slow down the speed of technology in their head and the business of their life and walk the pace of God. So that's why we go into extreme character challenges, and the one that's coming up, and we've started this in the last 2 years now, and I've mentioned a story, and I've got Cole who's going to talk about it. His impression and how it impacted his life. We've got 160 men who's been through 4 extreme character challenges now. So in the extreme character challenge, it is an opportunity to take men up in the mountains for 4 days, where we take away their phones, we take away their wallets, we don't give them a program. Man hates it when they are not in control of where they're going. Man hates it when they don't have their phone where they can check their email and Facebook and how many likes they get on their profile. So man has a lot of things that they don't like, but we just challenge them and confront them when they're up there in the mountains. But we pray with them, we read the Bible together, and we journey together. So we've got all the XCCs around the world, but there's one here just not far from where you are here at the Scenic Rim. So coming up, we have the next one, which will be on the 4th to the 7th of October. We'll be meeting at the Scenic Rim, and you can register at the website, or you can register with us at the end of this service. And we do conduct training heights, which I would love you to come. For those who come for training heights, you don't have to register. You can just come and be a part of the fellowship with the man. I want now to hand over. The best way to tell about the XCC is have someone who's been it, who's done it, and tell you the way it is. So I've got Cole here, who's been through the XCC, and he's going to talk about it. Let's give him a hand.
Thank you. Thanks for the invite to your fantastic church here this morning. I just wanted to say that a big thank you to the worship team. I found that fantastic this morning. I really loved that. And so Michael and I are from the south side, so we had to leave early this morning and get our map and compass, and it's a whole nother world out here, but we didn't get too lost and we made it on time, which is good. So a little bit about me. I was raised in a Christian family, and I've been brought up in churches from a child. My dad was a deacon and my mum was a Sunday school superintendent at Baptist Church in Beenleigh. My dad's a builder, and he actually built the church that's there now in Pheasant Avenue with his bare hands, and I've got lots of memories of different events that we had at our house and a lot of baptisms in our pool at home. But in all my church life, I've never come across a movement that's more powerful than this XCC. Something profound happens when you take men out of their comfort zone, you strip them of all their control, hike them along spectacular mountain valleys, and push them to the limit of their physical endurance, and then challenge their character. There's something about this program that confronts men like I've never seen, and it fascinates me that it seems to work in all countries around the world. See, I believe today men, we have an identity crisis, or many of us do. When I was younger, there was the feminist movement that tried to tell us that men and women are equal in all aspects. Today, there seems to be some sort of new thing that men and women, there's no difference between us, that we're exactly the same. Well, clearly we're not. And I believe that many men today have an identity crisis. We don't really know how to be strong men without being offensive. We don't know how to balance being the head of our house while still honouring our wives and respecting our children. These values seem to be at odds with the norms of today's popular society. Well, the Extreme Character Challenge addresses these issues and discusses examples of what a real man of God should be like. So without going into too much of the mystery of the program, over 4 days, as Michael has said, we challenge men and we examine the life of David. And we all know the story of how David defeated Goliath and what a great victory that was. But he also had many other giants, and we talk about them too, and some of them he wasn't so victorious over, just as we all struggle with certain things in our lives individually. So I've been fortunate enough to attend all 4 of the XCCs that we've had here in Australia, and on the last few of those, I've had the opportunity to be one of the guys that talks about some of those giants. And in particular, my talk has been around the giant of loneliness. Under Michael's leadership, as we develop this program here for Australia, all of the speakers, we are coached to personalise our talks. There's an outline that's provided by the people from the Netherlands and the 4M organisation, which contains excellent content, but the personalisation of each of those stories is what makes it real to the participants. So I'd like to share with you, just in the few minutes that I have, just a little snapshot of one of the talks, the talk that I've been involved with a few times. And firstly, I just want to give you some context of this talk, in particular the loneliness talk, of when it occurs. So it happens about midway through Friday's hike, and we call Friday the longest day, and it's tough. It's physically extremely tough. This particular talk is at the top of is in a clearing at the top of a pretty steep hill. So by the time the guys get to my station, they're completely exhausted. And there's no greater feeling than when you unclip your backpack and let it fall to the ground and you feel like you're walking on the moon. Some guys are happy just to have a break and lay down for a minute. Some are extremely cranky, wondering why the hell they paid good money to torture themselves when they could be back at home thinking about the weekend coming up. And some just close their eyes and nod off, so it's a bit of a mixed crowd. But allow me to share the introduction to my story about the giant of loneliness. So in order to defeat our giants, we first must recognise their existence. Only then can we take action to defeat them. I believe that unknowingly, many men are held captive by the giant of loneliness. Now, I'm sure that we all have work colleagues, Facebook friends, mates from school, sporting groups or church. But how many of those mates are we really close to? How many of us have a trusted friend or friends that we can share our concerns and our fears and our anxieties with? How many of us have a friend that we feel we can be vulnerable with and let them see the real us that we hide away so often? I know what it's like in my life to be popular. In fact, it's something that I've strived for and it's been important to me since I was a kid. I know what it's like to have a big circle of friends. I was voted most likely to succeed in primary school. I was a high school vice captain, missed out by 1. I'm the partner in a successful business. I employ about 80 people who I get on with by and large. I have a degree in construction and an MBA. I guest lecture at universities and at industry associations in my field. However, in spite of that, for most of my life, I battled with a fear of rejection, which stopped me forming really meaningful relationships. You see, as I was being formed in my mother's womb, she was planning to give me up for adoption. The moment I was born, she didn't nurture me. She didn't put me to her breast and feed me like my wife did our 3 kids. The moment I was born, I was taken away by a nurse, and a few weeks later, I was adopted into another family. Now, I thank God for my biological mother. In my late 20s, we reconnected, and now she's family. And I thank God that she had the courage to go through with the birth and not take the easy path of abortion. I also thank God that I was raised by a loving surrogate family who treated me as their own child. I had a fantastic childhood. But even though they treated me as their own, I wasn't. My real mother rejected me even before my birth. I sensed that rejection in the womb, and I spent my whole life living with the pain of that rejection. As a result, I've always feared getting really close to anyone in case they rejected me again. For many years, that affected my friendships, my marriage, and the relationship with my kids. Only when I was close to losing my marriage in desperation, I found a counsellor who helped me work through those deep issues that I didn't even know existed. Now, we each have our own story. However, it's my belief that most of us men, by nature, we are cave dwellers. I know that when I have a problem in my life, the last thing I want to do is share it around. Instead, my natural tendency is to withdraw into my cave and try and find a solution on my own. I'll struggle with the problem, often not sleeping properly, often having an extended bad mood. And only when I've come up with a plan of attack will I withdraw from my cave and maybe share what's going on. Until I feel like I have it under control, I don't want to talk about it. After all, aren't we men? Aren't we supposed to be in control and have all the answers? So that's a little bit of a snapshot and an introduction to the talk about the giant of loneliness that we have up in the mountains. And then I go on to relate my situation to the life of David, and we discuss how David was also rejected by his family and was at risk of rejecting intimacy. Yet over time, he found a faithful friend in Saul's son, Jonathan. We discuss how important it is for us as men to be vulnerable. Being vulnerable with someone is the most terrifying yet rewarding aspect of human interaction. Being vulnerable opens us up to incredible hurt, but it's the key to real connection, and we all crave intimacy. I'm able to share how over time that I have found a few Jonathans in my life who I'm now confident enough to be vulnerable with, and how important it is for men to have other men that they can be open to and that they can be accountable to. We look at the verse in Proverbs 27:17 that says, "As iron sharpens iron, so one man can sharpen a friend's character." And I share that since I found the courage to face my fear of intimacy, my relationships with my wife and my kids have flourished. And we challenge men to think about their relationships and not let them be robbed of the intimacy that God wants them to have with those they love. So in closing, I would like to encourage men here to step out of your comfort zone and come to the next XCC in October. I can guarantee that you will be challenged physically, mentally and spiritually, but you will come away from 4 days in the wilderness as better sons, better husbands and better fathers. And you too will experience how powerful this program is. Thank you.
A musketeer is all about integrity. It's about brotherhood. It stands out through our service for justice. The fourth musketeer is a movement of men. It's a band of brothers. It's worldwide. The fourth musketeer is based on the story of a young man called D'Artagnan. His life is full of ups and downs, just like most men. You remember all for one and one for all? As a musketeer, we don't just sit around and do nothing. We like to get outside. We get out into the wilderness, and there we meet our Creator. The extreme character challenge inspires us, and it radically transforms our lives. A musketeer fights for the king. We fight against injustice. And as for me, I want to say no to injustice, not in my lifetime. To do this, I run the Muskathlon. I want to make a difference. The fourth musketeer It's about ordinary people living extraordinary lives.
Thank you so much for sharing with us this morning, Michael and Cole. Wasn't that really fascinating? And I wonder, just as you've been listening, if God's been perhaps stirring your heart or talking to you about your possibility or the option or the chance of you being involved in something like the XCC, the Extreme Character Challenge. There's one coming up in October, but there's also next year there'll be another 2 as well if October's a little bit close for you. And so what you'll need to do is just register your interest. It doesn't mean that you're saying, I'm definitely going, you're just saying, I'm interested, and you can do that today, and you can talk to Michael and Cole at the table at the back here. I'd be really keen to have, they're usually teams of 8 to 10, is that right, Michael? I'd love to get a team of 8 to 10 from this church on an XCC together. I'm somewhat interested. I'll tell you what holds me back, and I reckon this is what holds you back too, is you think 4 days of hiking, I don't know if I can make it. And Michael looked at me and he said, you can make it. And so I thought, I will. I can make it. Now they've got the practice runs, they've got the training so that you can build your fitness, and there's a plan they put in place to help you with that as well. So don't let that turn you off. I think that it'll be a great challenge for some of us. Some of us, you're thinking, I can identify with Cole. There might be something else going on in your life, and maybe you're just stuck somewhere. And I just love what Michael said about the wilderness. And there's something special about the wilderness and the way God speaks to us out there, and that's been my experience as well. So spend some time talking to Cole after the service, and we'll see if we can get a group of guys together. Visit their website. There's lots more videos there that you can watch as well. I encourage you to do that.